paso a Maja Kohek, compañera en ICERS, antropóloga, investigadora, gran conocedora también de la planta, de la medicina, de la ayahuasca, y ella nos va a presentar una ponencia sobre un estudio que ha hecho, que sigue haciendo, ¿no? Es un estudio ongoing, ¿no? Sobre las comunidades de ayahuasca. ¿Lo vas a hacer en inglés? ¿En inglés? Ok, va a ser en inglés. Las comunidades de ayahuasca. Entonces, cedo la palabra a Maja Kohek. Gracias.
Gracias. Bueno, primero quiero dar las gracias a los organizadores de este bonito encuentro. Como ya es tarde y después de un largo día, mi cerebro ya no funciona como tiene que ser, entonces voy a switch to English. And thank you, Iñaki, for this great interview that you showed us now, because it actually sums up very much what I'm also thinking and what I'm researching. And yeah, it's an ongoing research. I did it for my PhD, but it's such a deep topic that I guess I will research it and learn from it for my whole life. But my presentation has the title, The Ayahuasca Communities. I'm going to talk about a community in particular here in Europe, and I will also share a little bit about some challenges that are related to plants from our experience in ICERS. Next slide. Yeah. So probably many of you already know our organization. ICERS is a non-profit organization that covers or intends to cover different areas. We are doing work with building alliances with various indigenous communities. We offer courses on good practices and integration. We are working in policy and advocacy. Next slide. And today I want to focus on two things in my talk. One is the research that we are doing in ICERS, or that I'm more involved in, and the other one is share some insights from the support center that we have for the community. Next slide. So in the support center, for those who don't know, we offer free service to the community, where we either respond to medical questions and questions about drug interaction. We offer also integration sessions, and we offer information to people who are interested in taking psychoactive plants for the first time. Next slide. So this support center exists already for over 10 years, and during this time we attended several thousands of people. But only in the last few years we started to actually collect some basic information from people who contact us. And this is basically an intake form, which is primarily meant for the therapist, for our group of therapists, to better prepare for the session with the person. But at this opportunity, I want to share some of the insights from looking at this data that we have. And it's basically from the last, since 2023 to the first months in 2024. So it's in a bit more than a year, more than 300 people contacted us, and a great majority of them were looking for integration. Quite a large number of them needed help with a crisis after an experience. And a smaller number of people contact us to receive more information when they are thinking about trying a psychedelic, ayahuasca, mushrooms for the first time. Many of these people in the last little group explain that they have mental health disorders, that they heard that ayahuasca or mushrooms can help with their condition, and that's why they are looking for it, usually because they are a little bit disappointed with conventional treatment, or are just looking for alternatives. Next slide. The majority of inquiries we get from the US, many also from Spain, United Kingdom, and basically a lot of other countries from Europe to Latin America. Here is a little map that kind of shows from which countries we get people contacting us. Next slide. And then more than half of these inquiries are related to an experience with ayahuasca, and to a lesser extent also with mushrooms. The rest of them are either bufo, DMT, LSD, MDMA, and other psychedelics and stimulants. This is not necessarily to say that ayahuasca causes the most difficult experiences, but as an organization, we are also known for research in ayahuasca and a lot of work that we are doing on it. So I suppose also people just connect the dots and contact us in this case. Next slide. And so in this intake form, we ask the person to briefly describe what their problem is, why they are looking for help. And by analyzing these short descriptions, I made this little word cloud where you can see a little bit what kind of topics come up. So we can see that a lot of people experience anxiety, depression, get traumatized by the experience, become one way or the other functionally impaired, which is to say that they struggle, for example, to socialize with other people or in their relationships. Some even have to stop working because they just can't engage in everyday life. Some experience prolonged physical effects, such as headaches, for example. Some develop the so-called hallucinogen persisting perception disorder, where they, maybe have a blurred vision or see traces. And generally, they come out of the experience much worse than they entered into it, And what I also found kind of shocking is that many people explained that they suffer from these effects already for months or even many years. So what's kind of obvious from this data is that the effects of psychedelics or psychoactive plants and fungi can go both ways. So if the research of the last 2 decades generates this impression that these plants and substances can be a bit like a magical cure for people with depression, anxiety, or trauma, we see from our support center that these same plants or substances can lead to the precise same problems. So then the next slide. So then the question is, why is this happening, and can we somehow prevent it or minimize it? And why is this happening? Well, partially because of bad practices, and also inappropriate setting. And I guess all of you know that setting refers to the state of mind of the person and how they are prepared for the experience. And the setting is generally considered as the immediate environment in which you take it, and the people you are surrounded with during the experience. But I think setting should be understood in a broader way, including also the cultural context one comes from. No, and this was a little bit what Walter was also saying in his interview. We come from a society where the majority of these plants or their active substances are prohibited and stigmatized, and these practices are often clandestine. And it is also a bit difficult in our society to openly talk about these experiences with, for example, family or medical professionals or other people. So it is also difficult to find therapists or people who could help you to integrate this experience, because several people that contacted us, of course, tried first to look for help in their immediate environment, but they didn't really have the success. So, on the other hand, there is still a number of cultures, like, for example, the Shipibo, where psychoactive plants are integrated in the society and where children grow up learning about them, they grow up listening to stories, stories about the ancestors, creation myths, and basically they learn about the importance of these plants for the community. In some cases, they are even used in initiation rituals. So they are essential to how these cultures see and interpret the world, and that I think makes a great difference in how people will frame and experience their effects as well. Next slide. So, of course, we have a lot to learn from various indigenous communities that continue with the practice to this day. But we can also find some communities here in Europe that did learn from different indigenous communities and other traditions, and that try to integrate these plants in their lives, try to educate people how to relate to them, how to use them in the most beneficial way, and so on. So I had the opportunity to conduct fieldwork in one of these communities in Catalonia, and this community calls themselves La Nación de las Maravillas. They chose this name because they say we live in a world full of wonders. Next slide. So it was started 3 decades ago by a woman who started a communal space, a house in the middle of the forest in a mountain, due to an instruction that she received from ayahuasca, actually from Daime. She comes, or she get to know the Santo Daime tradition in Spain, and that's how she was working with the plant. So nowadays she's one of the abuelas of the community, and she calls it a multiversity instead of university, because in this space, which is an intergenerational space, young and old come together, they share knowledge, they teach or they learn from each other how to use these plants and how to take care of oneself and everything we see. Next slide. So the members of the community consider plants like ayahuasca or cannabis, which they call Santa Maria, as sacred, as living beings that can teach and guide us if only we make space to listen to them. As I said earlier, in this community, there was a flow of different people, different cultures, different traditions, and each person that kind of passed through it left a piece of their knowledge in this space. So throughout all this time, they learned from, Santo Daime, as I mentioned, from Huchol from Mexico, from the Sikh from India, from the Camino Rojo, and many other cultures and traditions. And all these interactions would help them to develop and reintroduce some rituals and practices that largely disappeared from our Western society. So ayahuasca and Santa Maria are the two main psychoactive plants used in their rituals, and I will just shortly introduce one of them. Next slide. So each year, some of the community members come together to celebrate a ceremony which they call Navegación Mariana. Personally, I found this one the most interesting because it's only practiced in this one place. And while cannabis is probably one of the most commonly used psychoactive plant worldwide, I was completely unaware that cannabis is being used in such a ritualized spiritual manner in Europe. So what happens in this ceremony? A lot, but I'm not going to go into details. Basically, they board the ship for 1 week. You can see the ship on the left with the sail. And during this 1 week, they learn how to navigate the internal seas of the self with the help of Santa Maria. Part of the crew isolates themselves in a very small space, dry fasting for 4 days and 4 nights during this time. And the Santa Maria is smoked pure and also shared as a drink made from various spices and from almonds, which is what they learned from the Sikh tradition. And on the 3rd day, a small quantity of deck, that's how this drink is called, is also given to those who are fasting. And how do they describe the Santa Maria? Well, as a joyful energy and a teacher that brings insight to the navegantes or marineros during the ceremony. Next slide. So the Nación de las Maravillas is not your usual retreat center offering psychedelic experiences to everyone on Facebook. They are friends. They know each other well. They take care of each other inside and outside the ceremony. So the integration of these experiences also happens spontaneously and continuously. They can be discussed in sharing circles after the ceremony, but they can also be discussed during doing dishes or any other mundane activity. And of course, you can always go to the abuela to seek advice and guidance, or to some other elders of the community if you need it. Also, the ceremonies are not done for financial gains, but to strengthen the community bonds, to spend quality time among family and friends, and to facilitate a process of healing for those members who need it. And I also have never observed or heard any member experiencing any worrying side effect in this community. Next slide. So what we can learn from the Nación de las Maravillas and my work in ICERS in general is that our mental health and well-being does not depend on a plant or substance that we take. For example, if we think in what kind of society we live, no, we have abundant access to medication, but still the numbers of mental health issues are rising every year. No? There is more than 8 billion people on the planet, and according to the WHO, isolation and loneliness is one of the greatest public health concerns that also is one of the causes of depression. Half of the global population experiences stress levels so high that they impact their daily lives, no? And the list goes on. So what we can learn from these groups that integrated psychoactive plants in their everyday life is that true well-being goes beyond any single use or single intervention. It requires connection to oneself and to everything around us. No? So integration of these profound experiences or of any profound experience begins not just with individual care, but has to go hand in hand with integration of shared values, the creation of community bonds, and the inclusion of myths and rituals that sustain collective well-being. Next slide. That would be all. Thanks.